I listened a week ago to The Hidden Brain, and it was on a book called Try Not to Try. And so he was talking about Daoism and Wu Wei, and I thought, oh yeah, that was so fun to teach to students. But and so I'm just looking at where well, I'll give you the example first. Okay. So one of the things that we would do to have them see, because really it's actually shutting off the prefrontal cortex.
Right.
And I didn't know, I learned on that show that we have this thing that it's called, well, there's hot thinking and cold thinking. Have you heard that? Mm-hmm. I think it comes from the book called Thinking Fast and Slow, which I haven't read, but I've heard about. And hot thinking is all the involuntary that's going on, our breathing, our everything else. And it's what the person that was being interviewed said, that hot thinking is really where that Wu Wei, which means, well, it's something we usually think of it as go with the flow,
right.
Or being in the zone, all
right.
of that. When you can shut your frontal cortex off, that's actually active, but it's very attentive.
Yes.
But you have no effort with it.
Right.
And
effortless attention.
Effortless attention. And that's what you're always telling us, that all we need to do is just get to relax.
Right.
And that's the space, and I think that's the space of emptiness.
Right.
And, alcohol, he talked about how alcohol does that.
Temporarily, right.
Yeah. And he said he couldn't get the first chapter of his book. He had the whole proposal, but he couldn't get that zing in it.
Right.
And then the alcohol did it.
That's right.
Yeah.
You stun it for a period of time.
Yeah.
One of the things, so I wrote a book in defense of addiction. And,
yes.
And because that impulse or compulsion is really important for an artist. And that's why so many artists are alcoholics
right.
and addicts, is because there's some way intuitively, there's a knowing that this is impeding this, right? And so the idea is that the impulse itself, the addiction impulse itself, is always it's evolutionarily within us for creativity. But we've just said no for so long. We've just suppressed it and repressed it for so long that we haven't learned how to harness it. And so it's going to bond with something. So what are you going to have it bond with? There's the spiritual people who would have it likely bond with meditation and prayer. There's the wild ones who have it bond with intoxicants. Yeah. And then there's the artist who has it bond with just about anything that comes along. That's why they have so many lovers, but also deeply spiritual. And that's why that's the path that I was interested in. Mm-hmm. And so what you have to learn there, though, and this is the most challenging part, is both how to bond, be bound to, because that's what has. So in the story that you're saying, the bond is to alcohol. This is locked here, and that allows what's back here to free. Mm-hmm. So how to have all of those things, bond with all of those things in a way that's beneficial, and then allow the flow to happen, and then pull back and bond to oneself. That in itself is a very, very high art. But that is the art of all arts.
Well, it kind of reminds me of one thing I taught is in using both sides of the brain to learn. There's this left brain analysis and then the right brain reflection. Mm-hmm. And that you just go back and forth. And let's see, how did that relate? I'm not sure, but anyway, I'm going to go back to the story I was going to tell and see if it does. So for teaching this whole thing about getting in that right brain for a minute, or just changing the focus, I would have a student who knows they can't catch a ball, and someone would finally admit it and come up and they'd prove it. They'd throw the ball a few times. No, they can't catch a ball. And then I'd say, okay, don't worry about catching the ball. It's not about catching the ball this time. I just want you to tell me which way the lines on the tennis ball are turning. And they would, and they would catch everyone just by that little shift.